So this piece is a bit of an experiment for me. I've done a number of paintings on birchwood panel, but this is the first time that I'm doing an ink drawing on the birchwood panel. Now, once I've done my drawing on that panel, I just make a photocopy of it. Just 100% photocopy, because I'll be using this to create a mask, to mask off certain portions of my drawing. Just simply taking a nice sharp X-Acto blade to cut out my masks. This is one of those things, it's very important to have a very sharp X-Acto knife when you're doing this, so that you don't create kind of broken edges to the paper, and it's just normal copy paper. To mount it to my birchwood panel, I spray very lightly a little bit of photo mount and let that dry considerably before I actually put it down. I just want it to be a little bit tacky, so I don't want that glue to be wet, just a little tacky. And to help line up where the mask goes, I use the edges of the photocopy, the edges of the panel that appear in the photocopy. And I use my trusty Iwata HPC airbrush. It's a top load airbrush, or what they call a gravity feed. I've had that airbrush for a while. And for the background, I'm choosing my favorite color, which is yellow ochre. You've seen a lot of my personal paintings. Yellow ochre appears in them an awful lot. I don't know what it is about me and that color, but I love yellow ochre. So very slowly I am just building up the color in the background there. I don't like to attack my paintings when I'm using an airbrush, because I don't want to get paint that is, running and get pools of paint and whatnot. So I take it nice and slow. And of course, when you're using an airbrush, the very important thing is to use a mask. Now, if I were doing a lot of extensive airbrushing here, I'd probably do this outside, but this is a pretty minor amount. So I do it indoors, but I still wear a mask, because even though you think you can't see any of that mist from the paint, it is out there and you are breathing it in. So you got to be careful about that and wear that mask. Even if you're spraying it outdoors, you probably want to wear a mask. So I take the stencil or mask that I created off while the paint is still wet, because if I let the paint dry on there, then it's going to attach itself to that paper, and then it's going to be all messy and difficult to get off, and I'll have really choppy edges. And so I use my Pentel Fude brush pen. I'm comfortable with it, so I decide I'm going to use that for this piece. Again, remember, this is kind of an experiment for me, although I know that the ink and in the brush pen and everything like that is going to sit just fine on this gesso, because I actually have used this ink on gesso before. But I take my time and kind of work my way around. So one of the things that I learned after doing this piece is that I should have eliminated a little bit more of the sketchy pencil lines that you see. I should have done some erasing before I did my inking. Now, of course, I can't erase it all, because I actually need to see my characters and where to ink. But I think I could have lightened up those lines a little bit, because I did discover later on, after I'm finished inking, that to remove that pencil line was a little bit difficult, and I couldn't get it all, because ink doesn't have anything to soak into, like ink soaks into the paper. If I were doing this on paper, then the ink could set really nicely into the paper, but the ink is kind of sitting on top of the gesso. So if you erase, try to erase, those heavy pencil lines after you've inked it, you actually start removing some of the ink too. And that, like I said, is something I discovered later on. So that's okay. Live and learn. Regardless, though, I'm having a lot of fun with this. It's a cute little ink drawing. I love drawing these I call them tree dwellers. These furry, otherworldly kind of creatures perched on branches and trees, maybe interacting with each other or other creatures or by themselves. I don't know. I haven't done enough of these yet. I've probably done maybe 20 to 30 of these drawings of these creatures so far, and to me that's not enough for me to discover like where they're headed, what they're doing. I can see these evolving over time, and I look forward to seeing what it is I do with these cute little creatures. And for now, I love the simple aesthetic of just these wonderful creatures perched on branches and within trees and whatnot. So having some fun with it. I'm using my typical kind of hatching style that I do for most of my ink drawings. I'm trying to keep my lines, my inking kind of simple, because I want to make sure that a lot of the white of the gesso shows through, because that's kind of the beauty of this piece. I'm envisioning as I'm working on it that I want that starkness, that white against that yellow ochre plus that black, just a 3-color combo, I think is pretty pleasing. So I don't want to cover up too much of the white. This is kind of an experimental piece for me. You've seen in the other videos where I said, you know, make sure you test out things on the different papers that you're using. Make sure you test your inks and your tools on the different papers. Well, this is kind of my test, you know. I did wanted to just jump in and draw like a simple character, something that I could work on gesso. I didn't want to just take one of my gessoed panels and just start doing test inks on it and whatnot, and kind of throw away one of my birchwood panels. I mean, they're not super expensive, but you know, I don't like to throw away my birchwood panels if I can help it. So this was my experimental piece. Now, if I messed this up while I was working on it, well, that's another thing. You know, it is what it is. But I was trying really hard not to mess it up. You can see I'm taking my time and trying to make sure I get my lines in the right place. Like I was telling you earlier, the ink on this just sits on the surface, so I had to be really extra careful here not to drag my hand or my fingers through the ink, because it was taking a long time to dry on the surface, a lot longer than it would have if it were on paper of some sort. So if you do this, if you go out there and get yourself some birchwood panels, or just masonite or other wood panels and whatnot, and you gesso it, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll discover that it takes a little bit longer for that ink to dry. And on top of it, it's much easier to just scratch or remove that ink if you kind of rub against it or try to erase on top of it. But that could also be kind of a cool thing too, if you make that a part of your technique, which I did not try to do in this piece. But you know, I could see taking an X-Acto blade or something like that to this and scratching into it. A lot like scratchboard artists do, where they put ink on a harder surface, a slick surface like this, and then scratch away into it. I can definitely see myself trying that technique out a little bit in the future on birchwood panels. So you can see what I'm talking about as the piece starts to come together. The starkness of it, the very graphic poster-like quality to this 3-color combination. It's pretty cool. It's a lot of fun. It's amazing what just one little splash of color can do for an ink drawing. I love drawing animals and cute little creatures and whatnot, but the one thing I've just never been a big fan of is drawing creatures the way they look in real life. Meaning, you know, just drawing a monkey or drawing a horse. Well, that's not true. I like drawing horses. but you know, certain creatures like a, you know, deer or something like this. I've gone to the zoo plenty of times and I've drawn creatures and animals as practice, as just to warm up, just to have some fun, just to learn animal anatomy. But when I sit down to draw for myself, I very rarely choose to draw animals as they are in real life. I always tend to lean toward that fantastical and start changing things and adding things. And doing what you see me doing in this piece, which is, creating a creature that is kind of reminiscent of real creatures in the real world, but then it's got all these things and swirlies and the way their fur is, big ears and things like this, or tendrils coming off of them that just speak to them belonging to some other kind of world. And I don't know if that's because I get bored with animals the way they are and I just have to change them up like Dr. Moreau or something. I just gotta create these combinations of creatures out of sheer boredom for what's truly out there. I don't know what it is, but I enjoy it. It's just kind of my thing. I also like doing this where I'm kind of the branch is going black on the edges, where everything's going into very strong silhouette. It's another one of those things that I do to kind of help draw your attention to the main subject in the piece. Not that you'd really lose the attention for the main subject in this one, because it's just a single figure for the most part, centrally located, but I still like to do those kinds of things where I draw the viewer's eye in toward the center of the piece in this case, by creating everything falling off into silhouette at the edges. Now, I probably should have inked this little pixie dude first, since he's on the left side of my piece, but I didn't. And so I had to wait for the entire ink drawing to dry before I did that. But even letting it dry, I put down a piece of paper towel so that I don't mess up, or maybe the sweat on my hand picks up some of the ink and whatnot, which can happen, certainly on this piece, because again, that ink is just sitting on the surface. And there we have it. There is the final piece. I got this little frame, and the painting, or this drawing, I should say, is like 5 inches by 7 inches, rather small. And there's the final piece. This was the first one that I did as this kind of experiment on this piece, but here are some others that I've done after the fact. And I did change up my process a little bit for the other pieces, especially with the mask that I create at the beginning, that photocopy, and then mounting that down with the photo mount spray glue. I changed that to use actual Frisket this time, because one of the things I discovered about the photo mount glue is that it left little specks. So I couldn't go in after the fact and remove all those little specks of glue that might have ended up on there. So again, I went with Frisket, and that kind of solved that problem. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little experiment of mine. Do the same. Go out there and try some things like this with your inking. Ink on different surfaces and whatnot. I'm sure you'll make some mistakes along the way like I did, but if you stick with it, you'll hone that new process, and maybe discover some new exciting ways to work. I certainly have, and I enjoyed these pieces that I've been creating. Thanks. Bye.